Hello. When last we left off, I have installed an LXD Linux container running not here on this laptop, but on my QNAP TS251 Plus. It's a little, in its day, $500 NAS network attached storage server that I threw a couple of 4 terabyte drives into. And that's my thing that I can run little virtual servers on. They're more container servers than virtual servers. What you want to say these days, I guess, is container, implying you're getting the efficiency out of it that you should. And I put an icon on my desktop to let me log into it easily by just double-clicking it. But it does still challenge me for the password. I can type it in, and here we are. And if I type service, you can see, well, I have to type service space hyphen hyphen status hyphen all, which will show me the different services that are running, one of them including an SSH server that I had to get started on the last video in order for me to log in this way at all. So it did most of what was required. You may be interested in the fact that this icon actually has some commands to it. There's actually quite a bit going on in there. I suppose I should maybe run Notepad, paste that in there, and you can see the command that's actually occurring, where the SSH program is referring to a public key sitting on the drive. Actually, it's pointing to the private key. So the public key needs to be on the server I'm trying to connect to. And this is the IP of my NAS of port 2222 on my internal network IP. So on this side, the public private key exchange is set up properly. The private key is being pointed to, but that means that the public key needs to be server side. And that is why when we try to log in, even though the service is running there and we can technically get into the machine, I am still challenged with a password challenge. For those not in the know, for those not doing SSH server stuff, OpenSSH server stuff a lot, it's pretty darn easy to just accept the fact you got to type in the password, because the magic combination to make it work is not necessarily straightforward. First, you need to know where the config file is for OpenSSH server, which happens to be in cd/etc. Now, there's a lot of stuff in there, and of the stuff in there, only a small bit is of interest to us. And it's SSH right there. So we CD into SSH. So now we're in etc/SSH, and we'll ls there. And you can see when OpenSSH was installed, a number of public and private keys of various sorts were created. None of those are of any interest to us. We just need an, I believe it's called authorized keys, AuthorizedKeysFile sitting in here and being pointed to by the SSH config file, sshd config file. So this here is going to point to a file that should probably also reside in here saying use this approved public key. Now, it's a little bit of a trick to get because these are different systems that you're logged into through terminals, and they don't share a copy-paste-copy buffer. So what I can do is sudo vim authorized keys. You just wouldn't know this. This is something that over time, this information internalizes. Yeah, and sometimes you forget it and you have to Google it up again. So sudo vim authorized keys, and now I'm editing a file that wasn't there before. It's a new file. It's just been created. Now, what am I going to paste into there? Well, I go to my own local machine, which I know I can get into, say, through one of these terminals here. And then I cd into my .ssh location, which is the same between all my Linux systems and my Windows systems. I have it all mapped together so that they share the same .ssh location. I can look in there, you can see a few public and private keys. So the one I'm interested in is this, and it's a public key. So there's really not that much harm in vim id rsa mic2.pub. All right, and I actually need to shrink that down quite a bit so that I can copy it. Again, copy-paste buffers are not easy between different systems, so we all find our ways to do our copy-paste. Highlighting a whole line in Vim through Microsoft Terminal puts it into the copy buffer. And then I can say set no wrap so that you don't see the whole key at once, and I paste it in. Again, not that it really matters because it's the public key. It's the one that's meant to be given out. But I have now put the public key in location. Here is authorized keys. Now I'll just do as a precaution, I'm not sure if it's really necessary, but sometimes these things need to be in certain read-write modes. No, authorized keys probably is fine here. I don't think I need to do a chmod. That would just complicate things. But I do need to edit this file right here. All right, so that's going to be sudo. Again, we're going to need super user privileges, vim sshd config. And it's not the easiest thing to read here. I'll make it a little bit bigger. But you can just go up and down here and see what kind of options there are. And so public key authentication, we get rid of that comment because that definitely needs to be a yes. And this line, I'll leave the one that was commented out because normally it's on a user.ssh, a user basis for authorized keys. But I want to make sure that it knows to find it from /etc/ssh/authorized keys. Just like that. Okay, so save, write, and quit. All right. And that alone is not going to be enough to do it. If we exit out and then we just try and get right in again, I believe even with those changes made, see, we're still challenged for a password. So one last step. You remember that service command? Well, one of the things you can do is a full restart, which helps here. So sudo, it's going to have to be sudoed service ssd full restart. All right, it's amazing it doesn't knock you off. I don't see how it does this without knocking off your active connection, but apparently they've worked out whatever magic is required so that you can restart the SSH service without being kicked off. But when you do close it out and then you go back in, voila, no password challenge. And that is the purpose of this video, right? Now we can make sure we can say have network connectivity, sudo apt update. Yeah, all is good. My Ubuntu 20.04 on my home cloud NAS is ready for business. It's about the same now as my LXD system on my local machine, which I get into through here. So these two are very equivalent. A simple double click gets me into my local 20.04 LXD. This is running off my laptop. It's also hosting Jupyter over here. When you see I'm running Jupyter Lab in a apparently full screen app, courtesy of Edge Apps, this is actually being run from this Linux LXD container on my Windows 10 system, right? And so now I can have that going, and I can have another LXD container running not locally on my laptop, but rather locally in my house here on a NAS. And that is going to allow me to do some very nice magic with developing stuff in Jupyter first, fleshing things out, right? We often start out in here and get things correct. And then we run it as a .py file, because this is really Linux back here. There's nothing Windows going on here. So I could export this as a .py file, run it in location on a Linux server from Python, which is hosted here. You can see there's my virtual environment. So when I run Python, it's a extremely new 3.10.8 version, and all my pip installs that I have done under Jupyter are also done here. This is that same VENV environment ready to go, testing it in a very server-like environment. And then when I want it on a real server, I'll just push it over to here, which is running 24/7, and there's no reason I couldn't start doing scheduled tasks and daemons, and that's really the point. That's the videos that we're about to get up to. I'm going to go all the way from Jupyter to Linux daemons. See you soon.